All right, what's up guys? We got a familiar face on the channel here. This is Rob. You might remember him from my couple of reviews actually on his Volkswagen Golf R a while back. He's since moved on to bigger and better things. So now we are in a 2016 Cadillac ATS-V sedan. Today we've brought out also an F82 BMW M3 to compare against the ATS-V, because when this car first came out, the M4/M3 had always been the bread and butter luxury sport sedan, sport coupe of the time. That car really defined the segment a long time ago, you know, with the E30 M3 and then the E36, which I drove, as well as the E46 and E92, both of which I've also driven. It'll be really cool to see how the latest generation M4 compares against some of the new competitors in the market, like Cadillac. All right, so the car specs: 3,800 pounds, maybe 250 to 300 pounds heavier than the M4, 3.6 liter twin turbo V6, producing about 464 horsepower, 445 foot-pounds of torque. It's obviously rear-wheel drive, 8-speed conventional auto, although you can get it in a 6-speed manual. It's got an electronically controlled limited slip differential, and we're running the stock Michelin Pilot Super Sport tires today. Rob, you mentioned, you know, this has the optional Recaro seats. I think it's like a $2,300 option. So this car does have magnetic ride control, which is GM's really well known at this point adaptive damper system. So in this car, if you don't mind just, you know, making sure I'm doing this right, there's a mode buttons here. Okay, so that's in Tour, and then I'll go down one to Sport. I immediately heard the exhaust baffle open up a little bit, so I think this is going to be fun.
And this has launch control too.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
Can we try that?
You have to do that in track mode.
Track mode. All right. Well, why not? Yeah. Screw it.
Yeah, hit track mode.
Track mode. Yeah, so just left foot on the brake?
Yep. Slam it and all the way.
Here we go. No traction. Woo! Man, this thing's got no traction. I mean, granted, it is a little bit wet today, but you saw me fighting the wheel a little bit. Very traction limited, to say the least. Woo! Even in third gear, the back end is spinning. Oh man. Excellent brakes. Really good pedal feel. Wow. Wow. Oh man, this car's fast.
I think the greatest attribute is the balance.
Yeah, the balance. Yeah, you're right. The balance is incredible on this thing. Yes.
You can totally control that rotation with that right foot.
Yeah, you can. You might notice I went silent for a bit there because I was just having fun. Best way I can describe it is it doesn't feel like a light car, right? It's a 3,800 pound car. You can feel that mass through the corners. But the thing is, like you said, because of the balance of the front to the rear, it still feels really easy to control and it feels nimble. Your Golf R was a great car, but I will say, especially on the track, it had terminal understeer. With this car, it gives you options. Now you can add a little bit more gas, get the rear end just to step out just a tad, just a little bit of slip angle to get the front end to maintain grip and turn in more sharply. Even on the street with all the settings on and just sport mode, we're not even in track mode, you can still do that. You can still feel that natural balance of the car. It gives you a little bit of leeway with the stability and traction control, and it lets you play with it a little bit. I mean, you saw me making those little minor steering corrections coming out of every corner. On the other hand, the engine, for me, it's extremely effective at what it does. It feels every bit as strong as 464 horsepower. It's not a very zingy engine. Like you don't really, it doesn't reward you for winding it out. You know, anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000. I feel like that's the sweet spot. The sound is interesting. You know, I've never been a big fan of V6 engine sounds. which is funny because my NSX is a V6. This has a very, very naturally aspirated sound to it. I wouldn't say it's anything special. You know, this is, after all, a Cadillac ATS-V. You would expect it to have a V8, you know? The Chevy small block is what that company's known for as far as performance engines. This obviously doesn't give you that same level of just raw, like, V8 aggression. For this road, there's really no reason to use anything below third gear because of traction.
Every review that I've seen, Randy Popes, everybody said that these have turbo lag. You know, I've driven a turbo car all my life. This has like 0 that I can tell.
The other thing I hadn't really touched on yet is the magnetic ride control dampers. They're really, really impressive. In touring mode, they're super comfortable, very compliant. And then in sport mode, you know, it firms up a bit, but not so much that it feels like you're riding on, like, you know, coilovers, like aftermarket coilovers. So I'm really excited now to try Alvin's F82 M4. As I said in the beginning of the video, the M3/M4 has always been the benchmark for sport luxury sedans and coupes. They've always held that title of this is the best driving car in the segment. I think with a manual transmission, just because I prefer rolling my own gears, this is one of the best four-door vehicles I've ever driven, just in terms of pure driving dynamics. Not to say anything about the interior. The Cadillac Q system is much maligned. You were showing me earlier how the touch buttons are kind of difficult to use. And whatever. I don't really care about that. That's not what I'm here to find out. Besides that, the interior is not bad. It's got some decent soft touch plastics and leather. The Alcantara steering wheel is really nice. These optional Recaro seats are absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Rob, again for letting me drive the ATS-V. Let's try to find a parking spot here and then hop into the M4 and see if the original car that defined the segment can still hold its own against GM's greatest.
Awesome. And I bought this not because of the Q. I don't give a shit about that, because of the way it drives. That's it.
Exactly, which is why I would buy a car.
Exactly. Well, the controls on the steering wheel work fine.
Yeah, these are tactile buttons. It works fine. Get over it.
Exactly.
All right. See you in a bit. All right, guys, so now we are here with Alvin. This is his 2016 BMW M4. What are the options you have on this thing?
Pretty much I have everything that the car can offer, I think. So all the convenience features, and then the adaptive suspension.
That's good to know that you have the adaptive suspension, because that should make it an apples-to-apples comparison with the ATS-V, which has a magnetic ride control. So a little bit about the car before we start pushing it. 3-liter turbocharged inline 6, pushing out about 425 horsepower, 406 foot-pounds of torque. It's down from the ATS-V about 40 horsepower and 40 foot-pounds, but very interestingly, it's about 250 to 300 pounds lighter than that car. So this car weighs in a little over 3,500 pounds, and even if you got the sedan version of this, it's still about the same, 250 plus pounds lighter than the ATS-V, even though the dimensions are actually very, very similar. Pull over real quick. Let's just talk about how these modes work. So if you didn't have the adaptive suspension, you wouldn't have this button, correct?
Yeah, it'd just be blank.
A blank button? Okay, good, because I freaking hate blank buttons. It's such a pet peeve of mine. Traction control, we will leave that on. What were you saying about the shift speed? So we have a button here.
So that controls the DCT response, I believe. The higher up it is, that means the quicker it will shift.
Got it. All right, honestly, that feels every bit as quick as ATS-V, but the transmission shifts so much quicker. Just wants to step out a little bit on corner exit, but surprisingly the ATS-V wanted to do that even more.
I think these new tires that
just have more grip in general.
Yeah, just have more grip in general.
I recommended these tires to Alvin. The rear tires right now are the Firestone Firehawk Indy 500s. In my opinion, they're very similar in performance and feel to a Michelin Pilot Super Sport. The fronts on this, you said, are the Continental Sport Contact 5P.
Yeah.
So we got a little bit of a tire imbalance today, but that's honestly okay. I think I'm okay having more rear grip than front right now.
Yeah.
Going over these little bumps, right?
Yeah.
This car feels less compliant than the ATS-V. The ATS-V, like, you would still feel it, but it wouldn't have that kind of jarring, crashy feel.
Yeah.
Wow. Love the transmission. Over the years, I've really warmed up to proper dual clutch and like really fast automatics. You know, I used to be a die-hard manual guy, and honestly, I still am. You can't argue with this transmission, man. You pull a paddle, it does exactly what you want it to do. I can just see in my peripheral vision that traction control light flickering nonstop. At low speed, it's one thing. Like the ATS-V, like I said, it's more comfortable. I think part of that is because that car is like, you know, almost 300 pounds heavier. It's got more, you know, insulation between you and the road. This car, to me, feels a little bit more tidy and tucks in better in the corners, if that makes sense. Like, you get that suspension set, you roll in the power, and it's less wild. Like the ATS-V, you would constantly not be afraid of the rear end, but you would have to be wary that chances are the rear end is going to step out a little bit. And you feel a little bit more body motions in that car as well. Like, going into a corner, you get a little bit more body roll. I think on this straightaway, the ATS-V has a little bit of an advantage, but this car just feels like you can actually use more of the throttle more of the time. The car just flows so nicely through these corners though.
Yeah.
Woo! I got a little bit oversteer there. Oh man, the natural balance of this car is so good. I get carried away sometimes when I drive a car that's like this good.
Yeah.
I wanted to drive this car first before the ATS-V. Obviously, scheduling issues made me drive the ATS-V first. But the reason I wanted to drive this car first is because, as I was telling Rob, like this car, the M3, this is M4, but essentially it's still an M3. This set the entire segment of sport luxury sedan / coupe. Like when the E30 M3 came out, maybe that car not so much, but like the E36, 46, and the E90 / E92, those cars were definitely, in my opinion, the best in class in terms of driving dynamics. Sure, you could argue the Audis with the Quattro all-wheel drive gives you more all-weather ability, or the Mercedes gives you ride comfort and sound insulation and luxury, but this was always the best driving car. And I've driven all of them except for the original E30 M3. This is the segment leader, and then I wanted to try the ATS-V and see how some of the newer competitors fared against this, you know, gold standard, if you will. Having said that, I was really blown away by the ATS-V when I just drove it. Other than the transmission letting it down a little bit, the chassis on that car is superb. Even though it's a heavy car and it moves around a lot, it's really fun, and the balance of the car makes it feel not as heavy as it really is. Before you get to the point where the front end starts washing out and understeering, the rear end already will have stepped out. You don't have to deal with understeer, if that makes sense, because you're already on that kind of fine balance of front to rear where you have to give it a little bit of countersteer to get the thing turned in. So then hopping from that thing into this thing, I almost expected to be a little bit underwhelmed by this car. A lot of people really like the ATS-V, even more so than the M3 / M4. The ATS-V is probably the better daily driver. I mean, interior aside, I do think BMW still has ATS-V beat hands down in terms of like interior quality and all that stuff. And I think the iDrive system is just more mature than the Cadillac Q system. But in terms of comfort, I think the ATS-V has this beat. Also, I prefer the seats in the ATS-V, the Recaros. They just hold me in better. But this car, I think I kind of enjoy driving this car more. And it's not just because of the transmission. It just feels more hunkered down, which I didn't expect to say, because I heard that the early models or the early model years of this M3/M4 were very like difficult to control. But that's not what I'm experiencing with this thing. I guess I'll go against the grain and say that I kind of think this is the more driver-focused car if you want to go fast and feel like you're in like a purpose-built, you know, performance machine. I know that was a super long rant, but that's kind of how I feel about these two cars. It's interesting. So that being said, thanks Alvin for letting me drive the M4. I can't believe it took like this long for me to finally drive one of these cars, because I've been curious about them for like 5 years, like honestly when they first came out. I'm glad to say that the engine still feels really nice and linear. So BMW has done a great job of minimizing that turbo feel, but the sound, and I think this is where you agree, like the E36 M3 had a great sounding inline six, the 46 like rev to 80, you know, 300 RPM or whatever, like great sounding engine. And then the E92 M3 with the V8, like that was probably, in my opinion, the most special M3 engine of all time. Like 100% BMW Motorsport feel. And then now with this one, you have so much more torque with this engine compared to the E92 because of the turbo. But like, it just doesn't sound good.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it. And then I think partially BMW also has like artificial engine noise
through the speakers, right?
Through the speakers.
What is it with like, oh, I hate that. The ATS had the same thing. So conclusion to the video, hell, I don't know. You got to test drive both of them. I would say as a daily driver, if you can live with the interior, go ATS-V. More comfortable, and you know, it's more of a fun drive if you're just trying to have fun. This car, if you're taking it to the track, you want to drive seriously, and you want the better German interior, then that's the way to go. All right, so thanks guys for watching. If you like this video, thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.